So, so it's great to see everybody. Just to warn you, I'm in Berkeley, California now, and we have our 12th atmospheric river, and we are getting where I am. We escaped most of that, but right now we're in the middle of a gale. So if I shut off, I've left everything to our steering committee to continue the meeting. So I just wanted to let you know. And great, this is great. So I really need a blessing now, Avi. So let me introduce you. Rabbi Avi Killip is the Executive Vice President at Hadar, an educational institution that empowers Jews to create and sustain vibrant, practicing egalitarian communities of Torah learning, prayer, and acts of service. And for those of you who might be new, it looks like a lot of familiar faces, but if we have someone who's new to our meeting, we always open our meeting with a spiritual rally, with an spiritual inspiration. So please, Rabbi Avi Killip, give us some Torah. Lay on us some Torah.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to get to speak and kick off your meeting. And Deborah, just sending you blessings and hope that the waters don't wash you away and you can stay with us on this call. So I want to talk a little bit about how we pray about climate change as Jews and look at some ancient texts. So I want to suggest that we are not the first Jews in history to pray about the weather. That Masechet Ta'anit, which is the tractate of Talmud entitled Fasts, Ta'anit means fasts, teaches us how to pray for rain when rains have been withheld. And we have a lot to learn from the rituals and discussions in Ta'anit that we can apply to the current climate crisis and the work we're doing today. So I don't know if we want to share the screen. Yeah, great. So we are going to look at this little piece of text, and I'll just introduce it. So in Mishnah Ta'anit, when there's been no rain for too long, our rabbis turn to fasting and to prayer. But fast and the prayer do not look like business as usual. We pray about and for rain always in our daily prayers and our daily tefillot, but this kind of prayer is very different. Ta'anit offers us a mode of prayer for when things have gone way wrong, like your 12th atmospheric river, right? When normal methods don't work anymore, and you can't just go about your lives and pray like normal because things are not okay. Then Ta'anit offers us a form of prayer that is designed to get God's attention and to get our attention. So I'm going to read the text in the English, and if you are someone who can read Hebrew, you can feel free to follow along in the Hebrew. What is the order of the fast days? They remove the ark to the city square and place burnt ashes upon the ark, and on the head of the Nasi, that's the leader, and on the head of the deputy Nasi, and each and every one places ashes upon his head. And the eldest of them says to themselves statements of reproof. And these are the statements. Our brothers, it is not stated with regard to the people of Nineveh, and God saw their sackcloth and their fasting. Rather, and God saw their deeds, that they had turned from their evil way. And the prophet says, and rend your hearts and not your garments. So the rabbis stage a grand drama. I want to pull out 3 elements of this ritual and see what we can learn from each. So first, they remove the ark. Oh, I can't hear someone speaking. No. Hold on.
While we're asking everyone to mute, except for you, Avi, can you make your text can you just use your plus sign to make your text bigger so that we can see it a little better?
I'm not actually the one sharing.
Oh, okay. Whoever's sharing, please.
And we can also put this link here. This will just take you to look at the document if anyone wants to just follow along there. All right. this is the three elements I want to pull out and then see what we can learn from them. So number one is they remove the ark from its safe place inside and they bring it out into the public. Number two is they take on mourning practices, right? They place ashes on the ark and ashes on their heads of the leaders and the people. And number three is that the elders essentially scolds them, right? Reminding them that what matters is their actions and not a show of mourning and prayer. So what can we learn from each? Number one, they move the ark into the square. This is a big spectacle. It draws everyone's attention and it impacts everyone because weather impacts everyone. And a problem with the climate is a communal problem, and it calls for communal response. The way to pray about climate is together as a community. And the way to take action about climate change is as a society, which this group knows better than anyone. So we learned that this kind of prayer must be done together and it must be done in public. The symbolism of bringing the Torah into the public square is like bringing our hearts directly outside for God to see, right? It's so dramatic. The Talmud says in the next source, Lama yotzin larachov, why do they go out to the square? And Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, Lamar za'akanu b'tzni'ah velo na'aninu. We cried out in private and we were not answered. Nizdaveh atzmenu b'far hesia. We will therefore disgrace ourselves in public. So Rabbi Chia uses this really harsh word, disgrace. We have to be willing not only to pray publicly, but to articulate our failures, to wear ashes on our heads, to hear rebuke from a leader in public. It's no longer a private issue. Personal prayer and action won't alone address a climate crisis. So lesson number one is problems of this magnitude must be addressed in public, even if that's embarrassing for us. Number two point I want to talk about is the people fast and mourn. We are holding so much fear and so much sadness about what is happening in the world, and we need an outlet for that pain. And by taking on mourning rituals, our ancestors were able to play out the tragedy as individuals and here as a community. So prayer might offer us a similar outlet, a way to hold the crisis, a way to process our grief about acute losses, like after a deadly earthquake or a storm or a fire or something in our own community, and also might help us hold the anticipatory grief of the changes that may be imminent in our lifetime. That's point number two. Point number three is, I think, the most important for us right now, and certainly for this group on this call, which is that part of the prescribed prayer experience is that the elder rebukes the people, reminding them that prayer won't solve this problem, actions will. So the elder reminds them that it's not mourning and fasting, but tshuva that saved Nineveh, right? This is in the story of Jonah and the whale. It's not that they took on mourning practices, it's that they actually committed to change their behavior in the future. So the answer to how do we pray about climate change is that we must constantly remind ourselves, even and especially through our prayers themselves, that action is what matters, and specifically communal action. We go out into the square and we pray as a community to ensure that everyone hears the message clearly, that prayer is not enough. The idea that human actions affect the weather is like relatively new scientifically, but is very ancient theologically. Our ancestors really believed that their behavior could impact the weather. They believed that if we want to see change, we need to look at our own actions. And this is actually true for us also in this moment. And it's not a matter, right, of punishment. It has nothing to do with faith or doubt in God. It's simply a fact that human behavior is impacting our climate. And what we do matters. That mourning and crying and fretting and anxiety won't fix this. What we need is action. So our prayers, even as a rabbi, I'll say, our prayers cannot solve climate change, but they can offer us a space to mourn and a space to cry out, and most importantly, to find each other in community. And they can spur us into action, offering strength and motivation for the hard work ahead. So I'm so grateful that groups like this exist and come together, and that we can draw strength from our religion and turn that strength into action. And I just offer all of you chizuk and strength and endurance and hope for the work ahead. And thank you so much for including me.
There we go. Amen and amen. Thank you so much, Avi. And I neglected to mention that you live in Riverdale, New York with your husband and 3 children and are a graduate of Hebrew Union College.
Just Hebrew College, actually.
I'm sorry, that I'm a graduate of Hebrew Union College. Hebrew College, completely different. And that you teach as part of Hadar's faculty and are the host of the Responsa Radio podcast, which is a very interesting podcast. I highly recommend it to everyone. So thank you very much for those words of Torah and inspiration. And you know, it's true, a lot of us did internal kind of individual things. And in fact, the big corporations promoted us doing individual things, but getting together to act is so much more powerful. And it doesn't take thoughts and prayers, as we know in so many different social problems that we have. So thank you again for accepting our invitation. It's good to see everyone. And I wanted to we're not going to have a breakout time, but I just wanted people to dial into the gallery and look at all these beautiful faces of activists. Is anybody here for the first time to one of our monthly meetings? Raise your hand if you are. Welcome, Lenny. Oh, Lenny Berliner, my neighbor.
Yeah,
Yes,
I never
great.
see you.
I know. Well, I happen to be in California the whole winter, but yeah, we'll have to get together when I get back. And Susan, is it Susan Diamond? Yes. And where are you, Susan? Unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm in the midst of a horrible atmospheric storm, and the wind is severely high up where I live. I'm in San Mateo, south of San Francisco. And my friend Louise Lipsy, it's because of her that I'm here.
Yay,
Wonder
Louise.
Woman of climate.
That's right. Thank you, Louise. Yes, I'm in Berkeley, and I've been saying that the wind, it's a gale. It's definitely a gale approaching a hurricane. Anybody else new?
Yeah.
Myra Estelle Gordon, where are you located?
New York.
In the city or the
Riverdale.
In Riverdale. Elliot, are you in Riverdale?
I am, and it's nice to see some of my neighbors.
I know you. Yeah.
Oh, good. That's great. And we have Judy Burlfine from our steering committee, and Amy Dick and Joelle Novi are with us from our steering committees. So that's great as well. All right. Well, welcome everyone.
Devorah,
pardon?
Jessica Schimberg, I think, was indicating that she was new.
Oh, let's see. Oh, she's on page 2.
Oh, I didn't know there was a page 2. I need to go look.
Let's see. There you go. Jessica. Yes. Oh, yes.
Hi.
Hi. Where are you located?
I'm currently in the District of Columbia.
Oh, and Rabbi? Does it have an R in front?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's
Yeah,
where the base of our steering committee is, and I'll be back there after Pesach. So good. That's great. We'll have to get together. Okay. Be careful. Mirella will recruit you. Anyway, all right. So speaking of Mirella, let me turn the pulpit over to Mirella Goldsmith, our co-chair, and she will give us an update on what's been happening.
Good evening, everyone. These are such exciting times, but I'm going to keep myself brief. So first, we want to welcome 2 new partners to Jewish Earth Alliance. The Jewish Democratic Women's Salon of Atlanta. Thank you for joining us. And the Aquarian Minion of Berkeley, California. Thank you for joining us as partners. If your organization is not yet an official partner, we'd love to have you as well. And I'll just give a very brief update on the 3 issues that we are focusing on right now. So the first one is the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which I know many of you contacted your legislators about last year. the bill passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate. So we're still working on it. We expect it to be introduced any minute by a Democrat and a Republican in the Senate. So we are very, very hopeful that this year it can pass in this session. That will be our action alert for the coming month. And I want to highlight that Earth Day in April this year comes on Shabbat. So we're encouraging you to celebrate Earth Day Shabbat in your communities. And our Georgia partner, Jewish Climate Action Network in Georgia, is going to be helping us to send out some materials for that. The second bill that we're working on is we're working up to the Farm Bill, which we already have the opportunity to include many provisions related to sustainability and climate change. And right now, not much is happening, but we are supporting the Agriculture Resilience Act along with lots and lots of partners and hoping that that will be included in the Farm Bill. So look out for more information on that. And then finally, we're following up on the amazing accomplishment of passing the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're focusing on the environmental justice provisions that are part of that act. We'll be taking action tonight. Rabbi Melanie Aaron will be leading us on taking action on that tonight. But I want to remind all of you who participate in our fantastic, all 140 of you who participated in the lobby day for Tu B'Shvat, that following up with your legislators or their staffers who you met with on Tu B'Shvat about this action. You'll learn more about it tonight, but put on your list, your to-do list, to follow up with the legislative assistants that you met with after this and speak to them personally about their oversight of the Inflation Reduction Act. So that's our brief update, and I'll turn it back to Rabbi Devorah Lynn.
Thank you, Marilyn. That was great. A lot has been happening. It's been a very exciting year already. So it's my great honor to introduce our speaker tonight. Robin Lewis is an environmental justice activist and organizer and has a long history of helping others become more sustainable and inclusive. As a certified project manager, she held leadership roles at various technology companies, and she is now the director for climate equity at Interfaith Power and Light, DMV, which for those of you on the other coasts stands for the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. Educating Black churches on environmental issues, creating a local affiliate of Green the Church, and promoting community involvement in the environmental justice movement. She has worked on campaigns about trash incineration, water quality, renewable energy, just to name a few. And she is on the board of Why Hunger and leads her church on social justice issues. She has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Rutgers University and a master's in sustainable urban planning from George Washington University. It is my pleasure to meet you on video and to give you floor, so to speak, to speak about your experience in environmental justice and long experience in environmental justice. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen. And pardon me, I have a cold.
If you're not already muted, if you could please mute yourself.
Okay, can you see my screen? Everybody? Great, okay. So let me put it in slide mode. Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Lewis, as announced, and please forgive me. I do have a cold, so I sound a little congested, but I'll get through this. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm wondering if you can move to a little closer to whatever mic you're using.
Yeah, you know, I have a air purifier on. Let me turn it down.
Maybe that will help. Yeah,
that might help.
And I'm thinking, Robin, not only do we forgive you, but we also bless you that you have complete healing.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Let me stop sharing for a sec, and I will run over and put this.
Okay. All right. So, oh, do we have anybody from Aquarian Minion on the call tonight? Ah, Susan Desmond.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We're excited to be, I haven't announced it yet, but I just heard from Muriel that we were accepted as a partner. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also interested about becoming a partner with the Interfaith Power and Light.
I'm also from the Aquarian Minion. I'm Susan Diamond, and I've been urging them to be part of this.
Oh, great.
Louise introduced me to
Oh,
it,
that-
so to you guys. So I'm glad to know that they're now part of.
Oh, terrific. Terrific. Well,
So if we could get a connection to the Interfaith Power and Light, it would be really nice.
okay. Well,
Thank
we'll
you.
put that in the chat. Would that work? Okay.
Okay.
Robin, that's
you-
how, that's better. Yes, I think.
That's better, yeah. It was my air purifier. Sorry. Okay, well, let's get started. All right. Let me share my screen and let's get rolling. So I am Robin Lewis, as stated before, and I want to give you a little information about myself. So, I have studied, as I think was just said, I studied in environmental justice, actually studied climate change, affordable housing, displacement and gentrification at George Washington University. Went back to school and received my master's there. And no, sorry, I stopped sharing. I shouldn't have stopped sharing. Hold on. Let me start again. Please forgive me. I'm a little off today. There we go. All righty now. Okay. So as mentioned, I organized over the last 10 years in environmental justice. I've done quite a few things. Was working for various organizations. First started out after graduating with my master's, second master's, organized around environmental issues. Was blessed to meet Joelle in Interfaith Power and Light in 2016. And started working on various things with her, including Green the Church, in which we organized Black leaders around Black faith leaders in the DMV, mostly in Maryland, but around the area, on climate and environmental issues. So this is kind of my repertoire of things in a short list. And what kind of got me here, because I think that was something that was asked to me, was just basically I felt this draw to the earth, to the environment. I was already the social justice director for my church, so I was very passionate about social justice. I'm from New Jersey, so saw a lot of things there that was environmentally terrible. So when I got down here to Maryland, I then started kind of feeling like there's something to this climate thing, and something drew me away from what I was doing, which was computers and programming and that kind of stuff, project management, to the environment. And also my faith drew me to the environment as well. So for me, I was pulled this way. So I felt called to this mission of speaking out about the environment, and in particular to speak out for people who were the least of these, or people who speak out for them. It sounds like everybody, it sounds like someone's on,
Yeah, I think somebody,
Robin, you'll need to unmute yourself since I muted everyone.
all right, there we go. Let me unmute, let me do gallery. Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's get back into the presentation. I don't know, I can't see you guys. I don't know why I'm not being able to see you, but that's okay. I know you're there. So back to my presentation. So that's kind of how I got there. I started working with the Black church, and I started working on environmental justice and racial justice issues. Ended up working in affordable housing, and right back here last year started working with the IPL, working in particular with the Black church and on environmental justice issues. So that's kind of how I got here. So I want to give you a little history of environmental justice. A lot of people think they know what environmental justice is all about, but what happens is people don't really know the history. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history, just to bring everyone up to the same level in terms of environmental justice. So basically, environmental justice started, or the movement started with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968, when right as he was about to be assassinated, he went to Memphis to lead a Black sanitation workers march. That was his purpose because they were in such bad shape, Black sanitation workers. So he was leading the march, and of course he got assassinated, and the march went on. And the church, Clayton Temple, it was an AME church, at the time served as ground zero for the civil rights movement. And they continued this march. So that kind of kicked off the environmental justice movement. Then in 1987, and I'm skipping a little bit, but in 1987, there was a report, a significant report called Toxic Waste and Race. That report, that study, it was done by Dr. Charles Lee, and it was commissioned by the United Church of Christ. That study at the time was the first of its kind, and it looked at where toxic sites were placed in the country as it relates to race, income, and other factors. And what was found was there was a direct and distinct relationship between where toxic sites were placed and race. So that was the first study that statistically showed that race was a significant factor in toxic site placements. And as I said, I skipped 5 years to talk about the toxic waste and race study. But in 1982, another thing that was significant that occurred in Warren County, North Carolina, this was another impetus for the environmental justice movement. This particular area, unfortunately, was dumped on, and it was mostly Blacks living in the area. They were mostly poor, and it was rural area. And it was a toxic dumping site, and they just kept dumping and dumping, and the community got tired, and they said, I'm not going to do this anymore. So they protested. They laid in front of the trucks. They laid their bodies out in front of the trucks, and they were protesting. So this also was a big part of the movement. And so those two things kind of kicked it off. So, environmental justice is not just about equity. It's about justice. It's about not poisoning people. And so it really started with environmental racism, because the first view of environmental justice occurred because of the racist placement of toxic sites. So environmental racism, which is the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards, which still continues to this day on people of color, that's how it started. Environmental justice is the movement that basically occurred, and now we call it environmental justice, but it really stemmed from environmental racism. And it means that no community should be saddled with more environmental burdens and less environmental benefits than any other community. And that sounds logical, but that's not what happens. And to this day, we still have injustices across the country. So there is this this thing that came out in 1991 called the Principles of Environmental Justice. There's 17 principles, and I'd encourage you to look them up. And all you have to do is put in Google Principles of Environmental Justice. And they're simple steps, simple things, simple principles that say that communities have the right to live toxic free. They have the right to live not around hazardous environments. They have the right to breathe fresh air. They have the right to decide for themselves. They have the right to be sovereign. They have the right to determine, to have self-determination. It's a wonderful set of principles, and I encourage you to read them. So this is one of my favorite environmental activists, Majora Carter. She's from New York. She went to college and came back home, and she lived in Harlem, and she noticed that Harlem was inundated with toxic sites. And so she went out and she started protesting, and she started getting funds and getting money. And she came back to her community and was able to develop some community gardens and some places in New York that now are used for, not just beautification, but, green space. So I loved her, and I loved what she said, which is what I just said. Environmental justice means that no community should be saddled with more environmental burdens and less benefits than any other. This is just something I always show everyone because people think equity is the way to go. Well, this picture really is good. Maybe you've seen it before, but I just love the way this picture shows the difference between equality, equity, and justice. And we are focused on justice. We are focused on root causes. And as you can see from the picture, if we focus on root causes, everyone in the picture, no matter what your demographic, what your height, what your size, what your race, what your gender, you're going to be able to participate in whatever it is that's going on. So I just love this depiction of justice and what it means. So this is another chart that I use all the time, environmental racism. Environmental racism is nothing new. And as I said before, the study, Toxic Waste and Race, indicated that 3 out of 5 Black and Latino folks live in or near some toxic site. And that's about 56%. This chart actually, what's funny about that study that was done in 1987, it was again done in 2007, and the results were the same. There was no change. It still showed that race was the #1 indicator of where toxic sites were placed. So that's why this chart is really significant. So for those of you who've ever heard about this, it's called sacrifice zones. So sacrifice zones are frontline, fence line communities, usually communities of color, low-income communities that are considered hotspots for chemical dumping and other pollutants that are placed in those communities. And again, it constitutes environmental racism. It is still, shows that race is the indicator in this case of where these things are placed. And it's called sacrifice zones. And I'm sure you live all over the country, so you probably know sacrifice zones where poor, people of color, people that are the least of these, a lot of times, are placed next to these hot spots. So I do have a short film that I want to show. If that is okay, is that okay for me to show this film? Do I have enough time? I hope so. Okay, I'm gonna show.
Yes. When you say short, how many minutes? How long is it? Just so I know.
3 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Great. Go right ahead. Yeah.
All righty, I will show it. Let me.
Around our country, we're replete with examples of certain communities basically becoming warehouses for toxic facilities.
Most of the industrial legacy for the city of Newark lies in the Iron Bound. There's just so many things in a concentrated area that's less than a mile from where all the residents are.
You're not just breathing in one chemical at a time or one pollutant at a time. You're exposed to a barrage of pollutants. We're the ones that live with the impacts of mass consumption.
People think you need a hurricane to do this. We don't. We just need a day full of rain. And not everyone lives this way.
We're seeing an incidence of high levels of congenital heart failure, of asthma, children having learning disabilities.
I can't call it anything else but a sacrifice zone. A zone that's been deemed these lives don't matter as much.
We can't keep sitting back and letting generations be affected by it.
To create change, you can't let anybody take away your power or your community's power.
Sorry. So that film, I suggest if you have a chance to watch it, it's excellent. I'm from that area of New Jersey. It's in Newark, and it's a sacrifice. It's really a real, unfortunately, good example of what a sacrifice zone looks like. Let's move on. So there are other areas of the country. This is just local to me. I wanted to share some things local to the DMV. So basically, there's various toxic sites that are clustered in the Maryland area. And I wanted to give you some examples. Baltimore City, and all you probably know Baltimore City, it's an old city. So of course there's old sites, and there's a lot more toxic sites than there are in Prince George's County, which is in Maryland. Both of these have approximately 65% Black people, and both of them have a high incidence of toxic sites. So the difference between the two is that Baltimore City is actually the income level is half, a little more than half, if you will, or about half the income level of Prince George's County. What does that say? That says that it doesn't really matter in some instances with regard to income. It's more about the racial composition of the area. And this is just talking about Baltimore City again. There's an incinerator, trash incinerator that we've been trying to get rid of forever, and it's still there. And, they don't want to give it up. There's a lot of reasons why, but this particular incinerator contributes to approximately 27% of the pollution in the city of Baltimore. This is just another example of a sacrifice zone. It's called Brandywine, Maryland. And in Brandywine, within like a 10-mile radius, there are several gas-fired power plants. There's a liquid natural, or I hate to call it natural, but it's called LNG plant. There's coal ash being dumped there. I mean, this area is a sacrifice zone. It's 72% Black, and it's unfortunate because the area is a beautiful area. It's rural, but it's highly polluted, and people still move in because it's cheaper to buy there. So when I talk about environmental justice, I'm talking about a whole bunch of things. I'm talking about things that result in health disparities. So we're talking about air pollution, industrial sites, illegal waste dumping sites, all kinds of water safety issues, food desert, urban green space. All of those things are environmental injustices. Anything that impacts your environment is environmental, including climate change and global warming. So all of those things are considered environmental, and they all require us to pay attention. So just a little bit about the climate gap. So as I mentioned about the environment, and I mentioned other toxic sites being placed in places where people are poor or Black and brown, well, also the climate is an issue. It's a disproportionate and unequal impact of climate crisis on people of color and the poor. So when a climate crisis occurs, unfortunately, people can't bounce back. They don't have the resilience. And low-income families, they spend a larger portion of their income on things like energy, food, and other things. So therefore, they don't have the means to bounce back. So urban flooding occurs. And again, resilience is an issue in communities that don't have the means. So the people, Black, brown, poor people, end up suffering, and there's what we call climate gap. Additionally, we call this climate apartheid, where rich people can buy their way out of environmental crisis while poor people suffer. This occurs not just in the US, it occurs all over the world, but we're talking US, it occurs here. So I'm sure, and this is just a question for you all to think about, do you have any examples in your community where there's environmental injustices? I'm sure after we start talking about this, I'm sure you all can bring up top different areas that you know that are just unjust. What can we do about it? Well, what you guys are doing now. We could get educated, we could amplify the voices of people who are impacted, we can hold our local officials accountable. So jumping into some of the issues of today and what good news, I gave you all the bad stuff, but the good news is the Federal Inflation Reduction Act it has good things. And the good thing about it is it allocates $40 to $60 billion to environmental justice communities in various funds. And we're going to look at those in a minute. But it's the first of its kind, as you all know, and it's the first time any large amount of money has been allocated to these communities that are currently suffering. This is just a chart that I got from the EPA, which is kind of really cool. It basically breaks down where all the money is in the Inflation Reduction Act. And as you can see, a lot of it's tax credits, and the most of the EJ money, a lot of the EJ money, I should say, is with the EPA. But there are other monies distributed across the other departments, but the EPA has most of the environmental justice allocation. This is another chart I got from the EPA, which is really cool as well. $41.5 billion of appropriations to 624 new and existing programs at the EPA. As you can see, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund has a lot of money allocated towards environmental justice communities. Climate pollution reduction does too. And you can see there are some environmental justice block grants that are added to because they already existed, but now there's more money. So this is kind of how it's distributed at the EPA. So issues with IRA, and this is kind of where I kind of dwell. The funds are all over the place. So that means to me that where do you find the funds? That's a challenge for a lot of people. Eligibility also varies. So the environmental justice communities are not defined by the regulation yet. So the Council of Environmental Quality has developed a screening tool. That screening tool uses a disadvantage indicator that Justice 40 initiative indicates, which is it considers income and it considers some effects of various types of coal-fired power plants. It doesn't really consider all of the cumulative effects, but it's one tool that's going to be used or that's being offered up by the federal government. However, the states will also have mapping tools. Maryland has one. Some of the other states have their own mapping tool. We don't know yet. The regulation does not tell us if you can use your own or not, but we think so. I've said that to the EPA. I've said it to the Department of Environment. They've gotten feedback from a lot of EJ groups that we need a definition that includes more variables than not. So that's one of the issues. Access to the funds also vary by agency. And so that makes it difficult to determine which fund to access. It could be in grant.gov or it could be a state agency. So we don't know yet until all the regulations have been defined. Also, states have to submit proposals to receive certain funds. So if the state doesn't submit the proposal, then right now they're saying we don't know. I said, well, can counties do it? As of now, the regulations haven't been written, but it doesn't look like it. It looks as if the state doesn't submit it, then the state won't get those funds, which is a problem in some states. Also, technical support, it's going to be all over the place. We have to figure out who is going to do technical support for small grassroots organizations. How do you know not just how do you access the funds, but who can write the grants? What's the eligibility? Is it community-based organizations? Do you have to have a fiscal agent? I mean, these kinds of things have to be written into the regulation, and that's what we're waiting for.
So Robin, we were discussing today that it's such a big bill that the challenge is trying to figure out the flow of where the money's going. In order to oversee it, the challenge is going to be where the money's going. And you were saying that we can't just focus on the federal level, that once the states get the money, that's where a lot of oversight is going to have to be, and at the agencies. But you said it's still in flux now because there's not enough directions. Does that summarize it a bit?
Yes, that is correct. And okay. And I apologize, you guys, because I can't figure out how to show myself as well as the screen. It went away. You guys went away. I'm talking to you. Went away.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
so,
okay.
So if you want to stop me, just stop me. Okay.
Pretend we're on radio. Well, we do want to get we do want to get to our action, and I do like to have people ask a couple questions, but I think that is probably the main question, that it's hard to decipher what's going on, but it sounds like we are in a kind of transitional period where we have to just to be aware of what's going on in our own state in particular. Louise, what did you Louise, did you have a question?
I actually have a comment. I think complicating some of this is what's going on at the EPA. And it's come to my attention, and I imagine you've heard about this already, but that the EPA has just given Chevron the right to use incinerated plastic waste, which has dioxin and all kinds of terrible chemicals, in a community in Mississippi that's over half black and brown, very poor area. And if this goes through, this will happen to poor communities, and it's an environmental justice issue for sure. And this has just been announced through the EPA. And I think that has to be addressed too, because that will complicate the situation even further if they're allowed to really go forth with more dangerous operations like this. It's not a safe thing to be doing, and it's an environmental disgrace.
So
I could send you the information.
Right.
Mothers
right.
for
Robin,
Clean
you were
Air are fighting this. Pardon?
Robin was, we were talking today about how important it is to testify before EPA on regulation, which we have been doing through Jewish Earth Alliance.
Right.
So we should continue to do that.
Yeah, and I'll send you the information. This is sort of new.
Yeah, I was gonna say, absolutely. So I think someone's asking about state level, right? Okay. I was gonna, that was my last slide.
Right, yeah, oh.
It's good, it's good.
Well, tell us about it, yeah, but, yeah.
You led me right to the thought.
The meter.
Just staying on top of, not just the federal comment period, and because the RFI or request for information, a lot of that is finished for this regulation. Some of it is still happening, but it's about to end. So a lot of community organizations are already putting in comments. I've been a part of various comment groups, as well as been a part of stakeholder groups to actually speak to the EPA about different things. Now, the other issue, there's so many issues around the South. You brought up Mississippi, and my mother's was from New Orleans. So the Gulf is just, it's a shame. It's just, it's an area that we all should be totally ashamed of because of what they're doing to the people who live there.
Wasn't it called Cancer Alley?
Yes, Cancer Alley is right along the Mississippi, and going down. There's an area. There's a group called St. James. That area of St. James, which is right smack in the middle of it, and the people that's where they're from. That's their home. And this country should be ashamed of the way the people in the South are treated. But what I was going to say was absolutely stay involved at the state level, because not only will the state agencies be distributing the funds, they will be making up the rules. So we need to be, as activists, we need to engage in our state level government, not just our legislators on the state, but our governor as well as the Department of Energy, whichever departments govern these rules. We have to be engaged. So that's the thing I would hope to leave you all with, that it has to be drilled down to the state. Regional sounds good, but the regional areas aren't governed. What's governed is the state. So that's what I would like to leave you all with.
Thank you. Yeah, very important. Thank you. This was really a challenge to us. And I think our action tonight is very related. Robin, I want to thank you very much for being such a good soldier. And I know you're not feeling well, had a bad cold this week, but thank you so much for coming to speak to us. It was terrific, and blessings to you and your work and your continued fight on this issue. So I want to call on Rabbi Melanie Aaron from our steering committee, who is going to lead us in an action tonight. And we may go a bit over time. If you can stick with us on the action, that would be just fabulous. And I also want to thank Avi Killip, who had to sign off, put her kids to bed, for her beautiful Torah teaching and blessing tonight. So Robin, blessings to you. May you have, may you have a refuah shlema. May you be healed in body, mind, and spirit. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And
you're welcome.
I'm gonna leave you guys.
This is way too big for one meeting. We will definitely have more on environmental justice in the near future. So thank you again.
So I'll say thank you to Robin as well, and also pick up where Rabbi Avi Killip left us off. And that was, she told us that in this case, prayer is not enough, right? Prayer won't do it. And what we need to do is action. And certainly that's what we heard from Robin as well. So what I have on the screen right now is something that I think you've seen before, and that is more detail on the Inflation Reduction Act and the things that we need to do. Now that's an awful lot of text and more than we can look at tonight. So I'm going to summarize that. I'm going to provide a little summary here. And this is the money that we mentioned, the $40 to $60 billion that could have a very significant impact on environmental justice issues. This is money that can go to the communities that have suffered the most, that have had the most impact, but there are barriers to this happening, even though these things are so needed. The climate resilient affordable housing, the renewable energy, the block grants for community solutions. So we got some advice from Reverend Michael Malcolm, and it's a little wonky, so hang in there with us tonight. But our action relates to what Robin was talking about. That is, we need regional councils that will really understand the economic justice issues and allow economic justice advocates to make sure the money goes where it needs to go. So tonight, our action is to have you contact your senator. Whoop, I went a little too far. So that your senator will reach out to this woman, Brenda Mallory, who is the chairperson of the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, the White House Council on Environmental Equality, because she needs to work with the Environmental Justice Advisory Council and the White House Environmental Integration Council. So there are a lot of different players. They all need to come together. This does sound very wonky, but I'm going to make it really easy here. This is what you're going to ask people to do. You're going to contact Brenda Mallory. You're going to ask your senator to contact Brenda Mallory, chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and urge her to work with these two different groups that have the power to set up the regional councils, and they will be the best ones to give oversight for the distribution of these funds. Now, as a Jewish community, we are preparing for Passover, which is the reenactment of our people's journey from slavery to freedom. And there's something really important to think about in this. When we were getting ready for Purim, on the Shabbat before Purim, we read Shabbat Zachor, and it talked about how the Amalekites were able to attack the Nechshalim, the stragglers, because as the people were leaving Egypt, everybody just sort of went, and the people who were faster and stronger were at the front, and the people who were weaker, older perhaps, or children or ill were left in the back of the camp, and they became victims. But after Passover, as our people put together the camp for the wanderings in the desert, they reconfigure things so that they create a box so that there are 3 tribes on each side, and the people who are most vulnerable were in the center. And that's what we need to do. We need to center those who have been the victims of economic injustice. We need to center our work to make sure that those who have suffered the most receive the benefits of the work that we're doing now on economic justice. So if you don't have a link right this minute to your senator's website, though it's very easy to do, just Google their name and that will come up. You can find your senator's website by just clicking on this link here, or just search for their name. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to go back, I'm going to leave the screen up with the message so you can copy it. There's nobody there right now, so just send them a message. You can send them these all 4 paragraphs if you'd like as the message, or write your own message. The key is the 3rd paragraph, that we need to get people to work together to set up these regional councils so that the money can be distributed where it's needed most. I'm going to leave this up now for about 3 minutes, and then I'm going to stop the share so that when you've sent your message, you can tell us. Just put done in your in the chat, and then we'll know that everybody is set, and then we'll end our meeting with a little bit of a reflection, a minute of reflection on Passover, and wish you well and hope that your preparations go well. So I'll be quiet for a moment so you can copy this material, find your senator's website. And I'm going to paste it also into the, let's see.
Do you want us to say exactly this? I'm struggling with game changing just because it's not a game. And I know we use that colloquially, but I didn't know if you chose the wording specifically. And if so, I really want to stick to your wording.
If there's other wording that you're more comfortable with, that's fine. We felt that this is something that would be accessible. But I'm going to put the key paragraph in there. There we go. And even if these initials are not so familiar to us, they are fortunately familiar to Brenda Mallory, the Economic Justice Advisory Council, the White House Environmental Integration Council.
But can you put that back up?
Sure.
Yeah, because I had to log out of my laptop and go into my regular computer to do this. Okay. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay. This is not... Is anybody else having trouble copying this? I don't know.
No,
it might be easier to
You
copy
can
it from
copy
the
it
chat.
from the chat. Copy it from the chat. It's much easier. The whole entire message is in there.
If you just
also
go up,
took
go up the
Here
chat.
it
a
is
couple-
again. I just posted it in the chat again. Do you know how to find the
Oh.
chat?
Thanks, Marilla. Got it.
It's nice to see the names of some of the senators that we visited on Tu B'Shvat, and they'll become more and more familiar with us over time.
Hey, I'm sorry, I have another question. So I am new to the District of Columbia, and just
We don't
back
have
here
a
as-
senator, right? We
I
we have a
know, I know.
delegate,
And
Eleanor
but we are
Holmes Norton.
red state refugees from Tennessee. I don't know if if I should use my current address, which means that I would be in the district.
I would do Tennessee.
Okay.
We
Well,
originally
that's
said
not going to
thank
get
you.
us anywhere.
Well, originally it said thank you, and realized that not everybody deserves thanks because not everybody helped with the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's still
That's
important
correct.
to remind people that they have constituents who care about this. And if your senator always votes for this kind of thing, it's important for them to be able to say, hey, my constituents care about this. So whether they're sympathetic or not, it's still worth it to have the message go out. I'm going to wait another 2 minutes. I appreciate everybody staying on. Yeah, Scott and Rubio probably, are not enthusiasts, but we still need to talk with them. We'll give another minute here. It's great to see your intent faces working on this. All right. Then I'm going to close out the evening. I know in another couple of days, we're all going to be very busy with our Passover preparations. And I think of the beginning of the Seder when we sing Halachma and we say, Kol dichvin, all who are hungry, come and eat. It's a reminder of the message of inclusion, which has always been part of our Jewish heritage. And it continues this year as we focus on economic justice today, on inclusion for everyone in the benefits of our society, and our willingness to stand up to those who would leave the nechshalim at the end being vulnerable to all kinds of damage. So I hope you all have a good Passover, a good time of preparation, and a wonderful Seder. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melanie. That was great. And you all are terrific, staying a little bit later and getting this action done. That's so related to our speaker tonight. I want to thank everybody who participated, and Ed, thank you so much for your technical prowess, and Melanie for getting us going with the action alert, and Mirala for updating us. And welcome to all the new people who joined tonight, and to all of our familiar faces. May you be have tzedek tir dov, that you pursue justice in two worlds, in our own world, but also for everybody else. And so have a wonderful evening. And the storm has subsided here in Berkeley, so I can go out and learn some climate action songs. So there we go.